Do you listen better if someone shouts or whispers? Do you listen better if someone looks in your eyes as they speak or speak across the room? Do you listen better if there is limited amount of background distractions or if there are background distractions? Silly questions, because of course I suspect that we listen better to whispers and we listen better when engaged intimately and in direct visual contact, and listen better when giving full attention to the words rather than trying to hear over background noises. And this is so because really and truly listening is really and truly about paying attention to another. One of the good things about Zoom and other platforms of communication that we have been using during these COVID times is that it forces us to listen closely to each other, to speak one at a time, to weigh our words before jumping into conversations. And the bad things about this means of communication is that the more subtle ways of communicating are dulled and less accessible. It is much harder to read what someone might be feeling too, because it is harder to engage all of our senses to truly listen and have deep listening and paying attention. Listening and paying attention is not something that happens without some practice and intentionality. And even more so during this time of social separation, it is important to practice deep listening. I like to take time each day to listen more intently. As is the case with all of us, the visual senses that I encounter every day can be staggering. Television, radio, email, snail mail, moving vehicles, flashing neon and safety lights, advertising, flyers, newspapers, and masses of people are a daily bombardment. Oftentimes I do not even know that I am on sensory overload until I feel a tightness in my jaw and an impatience in my mind, and until I become aware that I am being less than attentive to others. And this is when I know it is time to pay attention and shift from overload to truly listening. So what do I listen to? I listen to nature. I listen to the rustling of the wind, the flutter of tree branches and leaves falling and birds singing. I listen to my footsteps on the ground as I walk and the noises in the Kittery neighborhood I just moved to, a neighborhood I moved to in order to be close to you for the winter. I also listen to the quiet voice of friends and family as we share a meal or a story or soothing music. I listen to the sound of my own breathing and silence. And you know what? Sometimes that silence can be absolutely deafening. This reminds me that it is important to think about listening and paying attention with our ears. One of my favorite authors, Alice Walker, wrote in her book, The Temple of My Familiar, about her husband. I was attracted to him because he was one giant, big ear. Well, in order to stay in and be in right relationship with others, it is important to be attentive and to practice becoming one big ear. How comforting is that really, though, to know that when we share our deepest struggles, thoughts, and wonderments, our intimate partners are one big, giant ear. But as important as ears are at paying attention, deep listening really involves intentionally engaging all of our senses, paying attention. I love this story about Elizabeth Peabody. She was an early Unitarian educator and leader who lived in the 1800s. She never married and was considered a bit eccentric because she was so innovative in her thinking and her lifestyle. One day, as was her habit, she was out walking in the Boston Common, ruminating on some theological, philosophical conundrum. And she walked right smack dab into a large tree, actually knocking herself to the ground and giving herself quite a bruise on her forehead. And those around her who witnessed this ran up and, after being sure she was okay, said, "But Elizabeth, didn't you see the tree?" "Of course I saw the tree," she answered. And no more was said, for isn't it true that we can see lots of trees in front of us? We can see even the biggest tree in front of us, and sometimes we can still not be paying attention and walk right smack dab into it. So paying attention means that we must engage all of our senses. The sense of sight involves seeing light waves, which move very fast, much faster than sound. To be exact, light moves at 186,000 miles per second, while sound waves move at 1,088 feet per second. Listening means we must slow down. And let's also be clear that listening well does not involve hearing better. I don't hear well, and as I age, my hearing becomes less fine. My mother was right. Loud rock music in my earphones and that Jethro Tull concert and other rock and roll concerts I attended probably caused some damage. However, the loss of hearing should not compromise my listening, and I try to not let it do so. I may ask you to repeat your words, to say something again, but I have been learning how listening involves developing different skills. Deborah von Dusen-Hunsinger, a professor of pastoral theology, identified 3 skills. I like these. They're ones I try to practice. Accurate paraphrasing, productive questioning, and checking one's perceptions. Carl Rogers, those of you who took psychology will perhaps remember him as the person who taught accurate paraphrasing and empathetic listening, explained it this way: to sense the client's private world as if it were your own, but without ever losing the as if quality. This is empathy and seems essential to therapy, he says, but I say to living. One must pay attention to be able to accurately paraphrase what has been said. It is not guessing what has been said, nor is it adding your own thoughts and opinions to what one has said. It is reflecting key words and thoughts back to the speaker. Productive questioning involves asking open-ended and welcoming questions that clarify meaning. Many of you have engaged in appreciative inquiry, and this is productive questioning at its best. But the hardest skill to develop and to become comfortable with is the skill that makes us check our perceptions. And one of the first ways to develop this is to become conscious of how we listen and learn to identify reactions. There are certain ways that are almost automatic when listening. And if you are honest about this and honest with yourself, you get to know them. First, we almost always take what someone says and put it alongside our own experiences, turning and molding the expressed thoughts of another until it fits our own experiences. And then when we respond, we use our thoughts and our examples to talk or speak to the other. And second, we have both been guilty of and victims of this. We don't wait until the other person is done speaking, but jump in to offer our words. And third, there are words or phrases that have emotional overtones that influence what we are hearing. So checking our perceptions and practicing good listening helps us to not become victim, nor to continue to do this to others. So let me give one example of a study done that confirms this. And there could be many more, but this one's interesting. A group of people were shown a film of two cars colliding. 1 week later, they were broken into two groups, and one group was asked how fast were the cars going when they bumped into each other and whether there was any broken glass. And the other group was asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. And each other of the smashed into group reported that there was broken glass, when in fact there was none, and they reported that the cars were going much faster than had been recorded. And this is just one example of the need to check our perceptions. For we all have memories and perceptions and words that greatly influence how we listen. So listen to the difference in your perceptions as I say these following phrases. A rally or a protest? Most controversial, most important. Focus on differences or search for common ground. Win the argument, understand another point of view. The other side and other side. Did you notice what happened to you when you were thinking about these phrases? What memory or image of past experience or interactions were triggered when you heard different words and phrases? And how often have we been in a conversation with a partner or a spouse or friend and suddenly be reminded that they sound just like our mother or our father or our ex? Remember, our memory is a powerful force for good or ill in how we perceive those around us, and sometimes our listening is more a reaction to past images and memories than to current words. Listen for this and other challenges. Listen not to confirm your own opinions or perspectives. Listen not to hear evidence that affirms your point, but instead that may broaden your view. Deep listening requires this of us. Martin Buber, the Jewish theologian, taught about the I and thou relationship. And of course, one of the big challenges facing us as humans and in all of our interactions is how to maintain our individual selfhood while at the same time maintaining relationships with the other. 2-year-olds practice this very well with the no attitude that marks this age, or adolescents who say, "You are not the boss of me." This learning to be separate yet connected is a lifetime process. And the I, thou is a mindset that helps us to deepen our spiritual connections with others and to know ourselves. Buber came to understand faith and religion not as a pursuit of some ecstatic experience, but as a life of attentiveness to others and the experience of the divine and the deep experience of interconnectedness, deep listening. Paying attention to another is positively the most affirming act of love we can extend to another. It is the way to see the divine in each other. It is the I and the thou and the divine in between. So let us try to see how this is so as we commit ourselves anew to paying attention to one another. So may it be. And yet again, we've gathered for virtual worship. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that this is the way that we express ourselves? Who would have thought that being in touch with one another meant crossing the miles, seeing each other in this kind of platform? And who would have thought that the warmth and love and the care that this community has for one another would be so able to be expressed in a virtual platform? And it is. I am so very grateful to be with you. I applaud all the work that is being done. It has been a time of deep listening. It has been a time of deep knowing. And I want you to go forward and listen carefully. The world is beautiful, and South Church has something to bring into the world, a beauty all of its own. Go in peace, go in love. May it be so.